In 1914, Ernest Shackleton set out to do something no human had ever done: cross Antarctica. His plan was simple in theory: sail to the Weddell Sea, land on the continent, and lead his men across thousands of miles of frozen wilderness, passing directly over the South Pole before reaching the opposite side. But Antarctica had other plans. On January 19, 1915, Shackleton's ship, Endurance, became trapped in the pack ice. At first, the crew waited. They believed the ice would eventually release them. It didn't. For months, the ship drifted helplessly with the frozen sea. Then the pressure began to build. The ice squeezed the wooden hull from every direction. And on October 27th, Shackleton gave the order: abandon ship. 28 men were now stranded on the Antarctic ice with 3 small lifeboats, limited supplies, and no way to call for help. For months, they camped on the drifting ice, waiting for an opportunity to escape. Eventually, the ice began to break apart. They launched their boats. For days, they fought freezing water, storms, and enormous waves, until somehow, all 28 men reached a barren piece of land called Elephant Island. But they weren't safe. Elephant Island was hundreds of miles from the nearest inhabited settlement, and nobody knew they were there. So Shackleton made a decision that sounds almost insane. He would take one of their tiny lifeboats and sail across one of the most dangerous oceans on Earth to the island of South Georgia. The boat was just 22 feet long. The journey was roughly 800 miles, and there would be no second chance. Shackleton and 5 men climbed aboard the James Caird. Then they disappeared into the Southern Ocean. For 17 days, they battled freezing temperatures, enormous waves, and hurricane-force winds. And somehow, they made it. But they landed on the wrong side of South Georgia. Between them and the whaling station that could save them stood a mountain range that had never been crossed. So Shackleton, Frank Worsley, and Tom Crean set off on foot. They had no map of the route, no climbing equipment, no time to rest. They walked through the night, crossing glaciers and mountains until, on May 20th, 1916, they finally reached the whaling station at Stromness. Help was coming, but Shackleton still had one thing left to do: return for the men on Elephant Island. It took several attempts before he finally reached them, and on August 30th, 1916, after nearly 2 years away from civilization, Shackleton's ship approached Elephant Island. Through his binoculars, he could see his men waiting on the shore. Every single one of them was alive. The expedition had failed. Shackleton never crossed Antarctica. The Endurance was destroyed. But every member of his crew survived, and that failure became one of the greatest survival stories in the history of exploration. More than a century later, the wreck of the Endurance was finally discovered nearly 3 kilometers beneath the Weddell Sea. Still remarkably preserved, still carrying the name that Shackleton had chosen for his ship: Endurance. Perhaps there was no better name for the expedition. Because sometimes, the greatest expeditions aren't the ones that reach their destination. They're the ones that refuse to end.